if I look a little different from usual, I don't have any makeup on. I have been traveling. I have been driving a lot. You can still see my suitcase there that I haven't unpacked yet. And for some reason, all this has been super hard on my skin. I've got spots, I've got dryness and bumps and ugh. And I'm just trying not to put anything on except good, nourishing skincare to get it to all get better. So if I look a little redder or patchier or maybe more tired or something, it's just because I only have a little bit of lipstick and mascara. Like, I've been traveling for a long time. It was a good trip, but my face isn't enjoying it very much. Hi guys, welcome to today's MoneyHoney's video. I believe this is going to be the last video on a little bit more knowledge about budgeting before we move on to the next achievement we're going to work towards in the MoneyHoney's path. Now, I am going to do some little budget bits here and there along the way because there are always more questions to ask, such as, you know, what does my budget look like if I'm a student? What does my budget look like if I'm in high school? What does my budget look like if I have a super variable income or I'm an entrepreneur and my money varies a lot? There are a lot of very specific questions about budgeting, but I think once we get through today's video, you'll have enough knowledge that you'll be able to work on that budget and work on revising it each month, doing it each month, and then we can come back to some more specific questions later and move on in our next video to the next achievement we're going to work towards. And just as a little sneak peek, that is going to be having 1 month of expenses in an emergency fund. That's going to help us make sure that we are ready for any emergencies that come up. Now, talking about that is leading into what we're talking about today, because emergencies are something that you don't know is happening. Emergencies are like, you got into a car accident and suddenly you have to like rent a car, or, you know, something catastrophic happened to your home that there was no way you could have expected and you have to pay for it, or you're injured and you're out of work for 3 weeks and you just couldn't tell any of that was happening. That is what an emergency is. An emergency is not Christmas is like a month from today and oh my God, I had to buy gifts. That's not an emergency. That is not anticipating things coming up. Other things like this include having to buy snow tires for your car, an appliance coming to the end of its life and you're going to have to replace it. There are things in life that are emergencies, in which case you have money set aside that you don't touch unless it is an emergency and there was no way you could have anticipated it. And then there are things that we know we're going to have to pay for. The issue tends to be that a lot of these things are maybe more expensive and you can't work them into 1 month's budget. So if I had just been ignoring the fact that, you know, the tires on my car were getting bald and then all of a sudden I had to fix it, the, you know, $500 for that would be really hard for me to pull out of 1 month's worth of budget, because I don't even know I would have enough variable categories to pull out of that I wouldn't end up trying to figure out, you know, I might try to put that on a credit card, and that's what we're trying not to do. We are trying to make it that you are only spending money that you have budgeted or have saved up towards something. So we are going to talk today about those categories where you are going to save money up over time and what that looks like. And there are 2 kinds of those. So in our last video, we sort of looked at what you do during a month if you are doing envelope budgeting, where you are going out and getting cash each month, putting it into your envelopes and using that to spend from. Some of those categories like food and like gas, they're probably going to be spent down every month. If you find every month you are left with like $100 extra in your grocery category, then don't budget that much money and allocate that $100 towards something else. Other categories, such as clothing, you probably want some left over at the end of the month, because it's probably that there are certain times of year you are going to be requiring buying more clothes, whether that you have children and back to school is a time, or like me, I right now desperately need to buy a new winter jacket because it is snowing outside already in Ottawa. And my one that I've had, I think I've had for 7 years now, and it's really starting to show its wear. So I know I'm gonna have to drop $200, $300, $400 on a good new jacket. That is not gonna come out of my budget all at once. I have been saving up money in that category over a number of months now. If it's one of those categories, then you can just keep that money in your envelope, and maybe don't take the whole envelope with you when you go out if you're just going to spend $20 out of it, but you can keep that money tucked away in there so you can see that you're building up some money in there, and when the time comes that you have clothing shopping to do, you take some cash out of that envelope and you go out and you buy it. Those ones are pretty easy. Then there are the other categories where it doesn't necessarily make sense to take cash out all the time, and an example of that is car repairs. So chances are when you are going to have to get a car repair done, it's probably once every maybe 4 to 5 to 6 months, and it's a one-time thing, and you're probably going to go in and use your debit card or write a check, whatever that might be. So it doesn't really make sense to keep that money out in cash. Instead, you just want to keep a running total of it somewhere so you can see how much of the money that is sitting in your checking account is actually in that category. If you're doing this kind of savings all the time, you're going to have the amount of money in your checking account building up. And you want to make sure you don't look at that and go, hey, look at all this money I have. I'm going to go on a shopping trip, because the reality is it's already allocated towards something. What you could also choose to do is set up a few different savings accounts. At most banks, you don't have to pay a monthly fee on a savings account. You maybe have to pay money when you're transferring it around, and even then there's usually ways of doing it so you don't get hit with a lot of bank fees. You can set up as many savings accounts as you want and have money building up there. I, for example, have a savings account for my next car. So it is sitting there, and I know all the money that is in that account is for my next car, and it is just saving up over time. And I thought what I would do is tell you a few categories of budget in my budget, and a few others you might want to think about that should be these savings categories. And this means that every month when you're making a budget, you should think about, I might not need this month, but I should be putting some money in there so that it builds up for when I do need it. So for me in my budget, I have the clothing category that adds up over time. I also have a category for hair because I tend to get my hair dyed about every 2 months or so. And for me, it's easier to put in, a certain amount every month and have that evened out through my budgets rather than trying to pay for it all out of the month that I tend to go to the salon. I have a car repair fund, and for me that also includes things like new tires. And I try to put maybe, depending on how well you know your car and how much it's going to need repairs, my car is reaching that 7-year-old point. I try to put maybe $100 per month in there so that it really saves up fairly aggressively towards car repairs. I also have a category for vacation. It kind of depends on if you know when you have a vacation coming up, and if you know how much it's going to cost, then you can divide out the number of months you have between now and your vacation by the cost and know you have to put that much in every month. For me, I don't really necessarily have a vacation planned at this point. I like to put a little bit of money in there every month so that it starts to save up, so that when I think about taking a vacation, I already have a little bit of a fund there for it. And that's the kind of stuff you can do when you are in control of your money, when you're out of debt. You get to start thinking ahead about some of the fun stuff. I don't have some of these categories in my budget, but you may have things like children's activities, especially if your kids are off in the summer, and that tends to be when all of their activity fees come up. You'll want to save up some money towards there. If you are a university student, there are certain times of year when you're buying books. I mentioned Christmas before. If you are somebody who has a large family to buy for gifts, and you tend to do a lot of traveling, then you probably want to put a certain amount in probably every month, so that when you get to December, you have a fund there to use and you're not scrambling. I'll put a whole bunch of other information down below about these kinds of funds. The last thing I'm going to say is that you probably want to think about what the maximum amount is you need in one of those funds. So I was mentioning for me, for car repairs, that I tend to put in $100 a month. In my mind, I think like $500 or $600 is the maximum amount I need in that fund. So when I hit like $600, I'll probably stop putting the $100 in per month and maybe allocate it to something else in my budget. And then when a car repair happens and I use it, then I'll put that $100 in every month until I hit that maximum amount again. If you have like $2,000 in your car repair fund, you have way more than you need. So think about putting money into accounts that builds up over time. Think about the maximum amount that you need it for. And if there's an expense you know is coming up, it's very easy for you to take that expense, divide it by the number of months between now and then, and put that amount each month into your budget. These are all things that help budgeting become easier over time because you are anticipating what your needs are. And then things are not emergencies. If you have a pet, I had a lovely dog for many years who had horrendous allergies to everything. And I needed a very robust pet medical fund because I knew she was going to be going in and getting shots and medication and vet trips and all kinds of things. But that was not an emergency because I knew I had a pet and I knew that they were going to have medical attention at some point, so I saved up for it. Emergencies are really those things that you have no idea is coming. Those are the differences between saving into funds that are going to be there for you when you need it because you know you're going to need it at some point, versus an emergency fund, which is what we're going to talk about in our next video. So as always, if you want to keep watching these videos and want to know when they are coming up, just hit the subscribe button down below. If you have not subscribed, it will be red and you can click that to subscribe. And if you have not watched these videos all the way through from the start, I would encourage you to do so. And I have a Money Honeys playlist that you can watch. So thanks so much for joining me today, guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.